we are. I had the magic touch. Oh, goodness gracious. It's so good to see you all here. Packed house. Love it. No pressure on me, of course, to deliver after a sabbatical, but I know why you're here, and I'm thankful for that. We're still setting up a few chairs in the back, which is good. Again, we do have some hearing assistance going forward. Let me know after, we can help you with that. Also, on your table is some surveys, some pieces of paper. Whoopsie daisy, yep. And some pens. I don't have enough pens for you, but pretty soon you're going to have an opportunity to fill out one of those surveys, and just giving you a heads up on that. But with that, I think, without further ado, let's just launch in today. We are talking about the great de-churching of America, some important research that's been done that was the focus of my sabbatical, and now I'd like to pray for the Holy Spirit to give us some direction and help. So the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we do commend this time to your care. May it be fruitful, may it be helpful for the building up of your church and the preaching of the gospel. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. As I often say, and they're getting more chairs back up. Keep going, Kyle. Let's grab some more. Do we get them? Do we have them all out? If we have them all out, we can maybe find Lisa and she can get some more too. So I am, sometimes people say, Pastor Bill, I like your teaching, etc., and I appreciate that. I feel like in my teaching, I'm more of a curator. And that's what I'm going to try and do with this topic of the great de-churching. It is based on a book by Jim Davis and Michael Graham with Ryan Burge, also who was part of the research team. And so I'm basing this class on their book that I read and studied in detail. And I think it's helpful. I'll say from the outset, I don't agree with all their conclusions and a lot of things, but it is the best empirical data on this subject that I've been able to find. And in fact, the reason they say they wrote the book, the one, Michael Graham in particular, I believe, is a pastor, a teaching pastor, lead pastor of a very large church in Orlando, Florida. And Orlando, Florida was known as the Christian Mecca. They had all these big Legionnaire ministries and, all these super big churches. And they found out from a local study that their largest demographic in Orlando was de-churched people. So they wanted some information, and they were having trouble finding any real data on this subject. We all can tell that something's going on, but they went out and raised a ton of money, and then I'll tell you about the research in a minute. So that was where they started, and that's when I looked at my sabbatical. I thought, well, this is really where we're at, looking at our local parish as well as the country on a whole, especially after being with it in Ethiopia at my last sabbatical 7 years ago, where there's now something like 8 to 9 million Lutheran Christians, let alone Christians in general. And thank you, Justin. Perfect. Yep. And so, and they're exploding in population. Just got me my clicker here. So why the interest? This room is full. And of all the subjects that I've ever taught on or raised, I've never had a topic that has garnered this much interest. In fact, I was having sleepless nights because everybody has been telling me for the last month, I'm so excited about your class, Pastor Bill. I'm going to be there. And I'm like, I got to really bring it. But the reason for the interest, of course, is that the people that have walked out the doors are your kids, or your parents, or your aunt or uncle, or grandkids, your friends, your neighbors, people that you love dearly. This is a quote from the book. I'm going to have a lot of quotes, but again, I'm curating some things from the book. They talk about how this, the family dynamic, and we won't do as much on this yet today, but this is obviously a family dynamic. Parents wonder, what did we do, or didn't we do? Mike was talking with a woman, and it's one of the authors recently, who had 4 adult children. They grew up in the church and in Christian schools. This woman is one of the kindest, godliest, sincerest people I've ever known. She is a fabulous mom and an overall person. However, 3 of her 4 kids don't go to church and are completely done with Christianity. Imagine her pain. Well, her pain is your pain and my pain. So we need to talk about why this has happened in our country and in our church. And so I'm going to set up some of the data and give you some of that, and we're going to get started with the conversation. So we need to ask why and what's going on. And I'll tell you right from the outset, if you thought there was going to be just like one main reason why, you're going to be disappointed. As it turns out, even though the data that we have from this book is multifaceted and looks at different groups of people, there's lots of reasons why people have de-churched. So when we think about the de-churched, let's talk about a definition first and foremost. And the definition from the book is that people used to worship regularly at least once a month, and now worship one time a year or less, or not at all, obviously. So that's the definition we're working with. I mean, you have to have a definition when you do research, and you do, so I think probably, we don't have to be too rigid about that. Maybe I used to say people who go inactive change their pattern. Some people, when they worship every Sunday, and when they're not here for 3 or 4 Sundays, we need to be like, what's going on, Some people, that's not their pattern. But again, it's really hard to dial down into that. So that's our working definition for de-churched. Now, on your tables, and I may not have enough, so I'm going to have to probably print some more, which is exciting. We're going to take a minute, because we're going to start with what you think are the reasons people have de-churched. And I think there's enough for each person at your table. If there's not, maybe we can grab one. And I don't know, Lisa, you know how to do the copy machine? Yep. Could we grab one of the little pieces of paper and just go make another 25? We got it, Greg.
We have extra.
And there's extra here. Does anybody not have one back there somewhere? We got some. So I don't know if you want to run some to the back, and Karen. But we're going to make some more. And so, in fact, I'm going to borrow Kelly's here. These choices on this piece of paper, and I want you to grab it now, and you can share the pen, because it's not going to. So I'm going to read through it with you to help you see where some of this is based roughly on the results from the book and all the research that these authors did. I've added a few to make it a little more contextual. But these are the things that come up when people say why they've de-churched. But now I'm asking you why you think they've de-churched. Now, so who are you thinking? I want you to think of a person that you know, a loved one. And the first question is, what do you think is the primary reason? I don't want you to pick 3 or 4 in that first. I want you to pick one. What is the primary reason you think the person you're thinking about has de-churched and moved to a new community, didn't find a new church? COVID-19 got one out of the habit. had other priorities for one's time, had a negative, hurtful experience at church, didn't fit in with the congregation, didn't like the style of worship, didn't agree with the social or political positions of the congregation, didn't agree with the theological beliefs of the congregation. Attending was too inconvenient. College turned them off. Divorce, remarriage, or change in family or a personal crisis. Began to doubt God's existence. And you might even throw in there like they had belief issues. Who else needs a piece of paper? We got some right behind to the right? Yeah? Perfect. And I know I don't have enough pens, but all you need to do is circle one in that first group. The next one, it should be the exact same, unless I somehow left one out. But I want you to pick the secondary reason, because sometimes there might be two. So I want you to pick the first one, and then the next question's the same question, but just what maybe might be the secondary reason. And I want you to go ahead and fill those out now, and you can pile them up in the middle. And next week, you'll get the results. Okay? Now, I thought about doing this all electronically with a cool thing with your phones, but not everybody knows how to do that and can do that, so I wasn't gonna do that to us anymore. And you know what? If you have 2 or 3 people you're thinking of, Lisa will give you another sheet. So she's in the back. She's got it. Okay? Here you go, Kelly. I'll let you do yours. All right, so take just a minute to look at that, fill it out. If we don't fill it out now, you'll forget, and it won't happen. So go ahead and take just a minute. I might need some mic runners. Who wants to run mics today? We got Wayne, and there we go. You don't have to run. Okay, did you fill them out? You got it? Okay, let's roll. I still see people writing, which is good. So just circle one for the top question and one for the second one, the secondary reason. Why did the person you know or love, or maybe you don't love them, but that you know that's now de-churched. Now this isn't somebody that just never went to church. Let me be clear about that. This is somebody that used to go at least once a month and now doesn't. Okay, so we're asking that question. All right, excellent. So the research. While you finish up, I'll launch in and share some of this. I took statistics in college in my undergraduate work as a psych major. You had to take statistical psychology or whatever. And my daughter is a data scientist for Peloton, my youngest daughter. So I'm not an expert on how people do studies and random samples of people, but these authors went to this organization, Qualtrics, to find survey respondents and to ensure academic reliability of each participant. For each of the 3 surveys, so their work was in 3 phases. The first one was a general to find out how many people are de-churching, and then once they found that population, they went back and dialed down into why they de-churched and different groups. You're going to see some things presented today of different parts of Christianity, like mainline Protestant and evangelicals and Catholic. This is stuff that AI and machine learning came up with. They did not tell them to search for this kind of dynamic. And you'll have to read the book if you want more detail on this. But these are things that just naturally came to the surface. And so they really went all out and got it academically reviewed to make sure that the data they were collecting was truly a random sample of our country and representative. And so they did everything as scientifically as you possibly can. Because there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there. And I'm going to give you one right from the upfront that I still not sure I believe. but this is what they found. I see a lot of our young people go off to college, and not a lot of them come out of college jumping back into church. In fact, I've been kind of a little frustrated with even my alma mater and other Lutheran schools that, I bet you if I had people right now, how many people went to PLU or CLU here in this group? Okay, that's good. Well, we got at least 4 or 5. Yeah, there we go. But if I ask how many of you are 20 to 30 years old, we might have 0. But see, that's my bias. Oh, there we go. But see, that's my bias. Guess what they found? They did not find that having an undergraduate degree increased your likelihood of de-churching. In fact, it was less. If you had a college degree, you have a less likelihood of de-churching. And if you have a master's degree, you have a way less likelihood of de-churching. So I'm like,
I'm not believing
Joyce just doesn't believe that. So, all right. But now we got to dial in, though. We got to dial in and find out our own folks. And so this gives me the opportunity to tell you that next week there will be online available a link as well as a hard copy of a survey that I would like you to give to the people you know and love to ask them why they have de-churched. Because that's the one thing that came screaming out of this. We need to ask why. People are not telling their pastor why they de-churched. I'll give you that. That's one of my biggest frustrations as a pastor. I would stop everything, but I just don't know. And I can't just know with a 900-member congregation why people are de-churching. Why people in our own congregation, let alone other people. But I would love for people to tell me, but I don't blame them because maybe they feel like I won't listen, or they, feel like, or whatever, or they're just hurt, or So we want to ask them. We want to say, we care about you, and so we'd like to know. We'd like some feedback. So next week you'll get that survey. So anyway, they did some really great work in this, doing this scientifically. So I know you might say, well, I'm not sure I trust you, Pastor Bill. That's cool. Go get the book and read it and research and see how they did it. I do trust their research after I've looked into it. Okay, so here's the facts. Let's get in and set up the situation. 40 million people in the last 25 years have de-churched in the United States. It is the largest single religious shift in our country since the 2 Great Awakenings and then even all the Billy Graham crusades, the people that, went up and gave their lives to Christ, all those, probably literally millions of people. You put all that together and it doesn't equal the religious shift that we're talking about. But of course, this is going the opposite direction. So here's some words from our authors. About 40 million adults in America today used to go to church, but no longer do, which accounts for around 16% of our adult population. For the first time in 8 decades, that Gallup poll has tracked American religious membership. More adults in the United States do not attend church than attend church. And this is not a gradual shift, it's a jolting one. Despite this rapid growth, now they're referring to the Great Awakenings, like especially after the Civil War. That was the big one. The Methodist circuit riders and Christianity really took off after the Civil War. From 1870 to 1895, church attendance more than doubled from 13.5 million people to 32.7 million. As the general population grew from 38 million to 69 or 70 million people, the net result was a 12% increase in churchgoers. Because this growth happened in a short span of only 25 years, it became the largest religious shift in the history of our country until now. We've witnessed in the last 25 years is a religious shift about 1.2 times larger, but going in the opposite direction. In that time, about 40 million people have stopped attending church. Adding to the alarm is the fact that this phenomenon has rapidly increased since the 1990s. de-churching, well, I'll just keep going here for a minute. So when people, the de-churched of this survey and study, when they were asked when they de-churched, you can see, you don't have to read the gist of this, is that most of the de-churched, look, when they said they stopped attending. Okay, well, let's dial down even more. So 1990 is kind of the watershed time. Now this is mainline Protestant. How we doing? You got it? It's good. Bravo.
It's just backwards. Can you mirror the camera? So you're.
It usually is not. It's usually not backwards. Okay, I guess I could have to go this way, but then can you line it up? Can you line it up?
Sorry.
Yeah, usually it's.
Yeah.
Just great. Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to be backwards right from the get-go. Okay, is that straight enough?
Yeah.
Is that looking good?
Yep, look good.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Gotta get Pastor Bill straightened out.
Straighten out. I don't want to de-church right away. All right, so this is the population decline of mainline Protestant churches. This is the evangelicals. This is those mainline. Mainline comes from all the churches were on the what? Main street in the old town. I think that's where the term mainline. But you're talking, Ron?
Just a question. I noticed it went from 10 to 12, so it's increasing from 2017.
It did just until 2019 or so. And that's where this study stopped. So they didn't have data on this one.
I just think it's interesting that it's gone up.
That it went up a little bit. Yeah, it is interesting. But you can see from back in the 80s, and this is the point, is that the de-churching in the mainline churches started back in the 80s. And then the Catholics fell right in after that. And then the evangelical churches now are facing the de-churching stuff. I think from the research of the book, as I remember right, they said there's like 2 different denominations that are not declining. The Assemblies of God denomination, which is a Pentecostal expression, and what was the other one? Southern Baptist declined just the same. I forget what the other one was. But anyway, all the churches are this is happening. And then, of course, in the wider context, just any religious affiliation, 18 to 35-year-olds, this is tracking that over the years. And you'll note the big shift right here in the 90s, where the nuns, people that say, I have no religious affiliation, took off, and the people that say they do dropped. And that's just 18 to 35-year-olds. So we know the younger population is that the nuns are growing, and the folks that say they have a connection is more. So I'm just giving you the wider context. This is they quote the Gallup poll, which is another very renowned survey group. 8 decades of history. In 2020, church membership in the United States fell below 50% in America. From World War II all the way to the mid-90s, church membership among adults was nearly always above 70%. So we've gone from 70 to below 50 in church membership. Now again, I'm going to give you some hope on this today, don't worry. But, we want to address this now. Just like we want to address our congregation situation so that we're in 20 years stronger than we are now. But in Europe, a lot of countries, the ones that I know of, England and Germany, I think England's like 5% even claim to be Christian. Germany's about the same. In Wittenberg, I remember they were a little higher. They were 8%. So we still have a large folks that are concerned or part of the church. Okay, so this is also, again, just giving you some more bad news just to make you got to tune in. According to Lifeway research in 2019, approximately 3,000 Protestant churches were started in the U.S., but 4,500 Protestant churches closed. Okay, just 5 years prior, in 2014, the Lifeway study found that 3,700 churches had closed and 4,000 opened. As you can see, the rate of church planting has slowed and the rate of church closures has accelerated. The de-churching phenomenon is likely a large factor in those shifts. Okay, let's look at what's our wider context as Lutheran Christians. So I just picked the two largest Lutheran denominations. Missouri Synod, which I grew up in, went from in the last 25 years, went from 6,200 congregations to 5,800. So they lost 400 congregations, if I'm doing my math right. And they went from 2.6 million members to 1.8. Okay? Now, that's Missouri. Now let's look, so that's a 30% drop. Now, if you don't know Lutheran like groups, which is totally fine, Missouri Synod is probably more focused on the confessions than the ELCA, and their biblical interpretation, their hermeneutics is different, so they don't ordain women. They practice close communion, as they call it. You have to be a member to receive communion. And then there's other issues. They're known as being more conservative. So that, just to give you a little context on that. The ELC, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which was a merger of 3 different Lutheran groups back in 1988, went from 10,500 congregations to 8,600 congregations the last 25 years, from 5.2 million members to 3 million. So this is a drop of 42%. So this is what's happening nationally. Locally in our own synod, I don't have exact numbers, but we had 80-plus synods, 80-plus congregations. A number close, it seems, every year. And I think I heard recently, debate about maybe at least 25% of those are in danger of closing in the next 5 to 10 years. When Pastor Paula took her call to Vinland, which should never be mentioned. No. The event that should never. No, we're so happy for her, and Vinland is thriving under her leadership. It's fabulous. But it just came to find out that when I was talking to her about that there's only really a handful, maybe less than 10 of those 80 congregations that can afford even one pastor of more than 10 years of experience. So that's our synod. Now, this is a little, this ELCA data is a little skewed by this fact. In the ELCA, there's been 2 big exits from the ELCA. Back in 2001, the Lutheran Congregations and Missions for Christ was formed because mainly out of the full communion agreement with the Episcopal Church, where we said we'll only ordain pastors by bishops, and we'll make that a must versus a may thing. And so there's a lot of theological issues, and there were other biblical interpretation issues certainly going on. But the LCMC formed, and 1,000 congregations exited back in 2001, or approximately. And that didn't just happen right away, it happened over time. And that's around 300,000 people from my research. In 2010, the North American Lutheran Church was formed. And by the way, both these church bodies ordain women. And so they're not like Missouri Synod, knockoffs, so to speak. So there's differences there. But the North American Lutheran Church has about 500 congregations. And that was a congregational movement. And those congregations said that, they fit better differently. But that's 500 congregations, or about 180,000 people. So if you do the math, that takes our ELCA down. So it's roughly close to Missouri when you factor those out as far as how many congregations just closed because for other factors and how many members. So that is what it is. There's lots of reasons why we could think about why that is, but I'm just setting the context, making sure you come back next week to find out some more hope. But anyway, we're good. At some point, the rate of de-churching, though, according to our authors, will slow down, not necessarily because the underlying reasons have been mitigated, but simply because there won't be enough people going to church regularly to sustain the rate of people leaving the church. the de-churched will give away to the unchurched those who never attended church to begin with. And so they make the point, and exactly the reason you're here is this is really important moment for the church to look at things and say, what are we going to do? So who are the people who are exiting? Well, guess what? It's almost an even split between men and women. A few more men than women, although we know that more women are in church than men. And then by generation, baby boomers, those born between 46 and 64, are de-churching in larger numbers as more than 35% of the boomers living today have stopped attending church. So there wasn't a ton of them already, but the ones that did, 35% of them have exited. This is about twice the size of millennials, between 17 and 25%, which is not a surprise as more baby boomers went to church in the first place, which gives them more opportunity to make this shift. So that's a little bit on the demographics of generations. It's interesting, black and white Americans are de-churching in comparable numbers, 26% to 27%. Hispanic Americans are experiencing the least de-churching at 14%. Why is this? Well, you know, the value of the Catholic Church and the church in that culture is really large, and so they've even endured some of the scandals in the Catholic Church, and there's been less of that. And then, it's somewhat perplexingly, the authors say Asian Americans have de-churched at 34%, which is really interesting. All right, so now let's look at the reasons that people talk about this. And you will not be able to see, some of you, all of the, what they say, but some of them are on the sheet that you just filled out for people. But so this is mainline Protestants. And I'll tell you that these authors are evangelical pastors. What that means today is American evangelicalism, non-denominational. They're either Reformed or Baptist, really. You know, non-denomination, is a denomination. Right?
Yes.
I mean, they're either Baptist or Reformed Calvinists, or maybe Pentecostals, but they just don't affiliate with a denomination. So theology is theology. Everybody has different perspectives. But when they did this research, so they were able to pull out, okay, what about mainline churches like Methodist and Lutheran and Episcopal and Presbyterian? By the way, the Presbyterians, I didn't give you this, they have the biggest drop in membership. Partly because they've also had a big church schism too. But nonetheless, even with that factored in, the Presbyterians have lost even, I think, from these folks' research, more than the ELCA. But we don't want to celebrate who's doing the best in D-Church and doing. Okay, so, but this is mainline. Now, these are the reasons. Now, what surprises you? Can you read those? The first one is what?
Moved.
That's amazing.
Moved to a new community. Didn't you figure that it had to be some big theological crisis, or some big controversy, or some big upset? The authors call these folks casual de-churchers. Because it just happened. Just happened. They moved to a new community and didn't plug in. I kind of think COVID functioned this way, although in the mainline Protestant results, COVID isn't up here. But I can't imagine that doesn't factor in somewhere. COVID was like a move. People stopped attending. And then when the restrictions went off, and then when it was safer, depending on one's perspective or whatever, but then they just didn't come back. That is definitely the case in this congregation. You've been hearing me say, our average worship before COVID was 375, and now our average worship is 300. And you can talk to me about online all you want. I just have no idea how to gauge that. We may have more people worshiping at a certain level than we ever have, but I have no idea. I have no idea how to judge the level of engagement. I know some families sit down and watch do a worship service. I know some members do. I mean, that live stream is the lifeblood of a lot of our people who are homebound, who have physical challenges or health challenges. But just our in-person worship, that's where we're at. So, this obviously goes, well, what could we do about that? Wow. Maybe our church should be ready to extend an invitation to everybody that moves into our county. Like, boom. We be the first ones there. And we say who we are and invite people. We'd love to have you here. Encourage people to make, with all the chaos of a move, jump in. Had other priorities for my time and money. I didn't fit in with the congregation. 14%. I disagree with the politics of the congregation. 13%. I began to doubt God's existence, so there was a theological issue. 10%. Attending was inconvenient. 10%. Divorce, remarriage, or other family change. I didn't experience much love in the congregation. These were the biggest selections of people who de-churched in mainline denominations. That surprised me. One, that it was so diverse. Now, we could probably lump some of these together, couldn't we? Other priorities, move to a new community. Those are different, but other priorities, people, I didn't fit in the congregation. Now, that could mean a lot of things, obviously. Maybe I didn't fit theologically. These authors do dial down into issues around homosexuality and gender identity and other issues, and maybe we can get into some of that. I just didn't fit. I was young, and I just didn't see enough young family. There's all kinds of things. Like I know I've told some of you this already. In my visits to our local county churches during my sabbatical, it's clear birds of a feather flock together. I want to tell all of our young families with kids, please come every Sunday, because there's new families that come, and if they don't see you, they leave the door. Now, I'm not putting you under any great pressure. And I know, I had kids, I had two girls, although Sandy was a single parent, I was off, it's probably like Olivia with Justin, he's doing stuff, and she's got to get all the kids there. And, the same way, that was true for my wife, but nonetheless, so I know it's hard. In fact, it's way harder than it ever has been when it comes to, getting here with dual incomes and all kinds of things. But nonetheless, birds of a feather flock together, and that's interesting. So maybe I didn't fit in the congregation. Maybe I didn't fit in the congregation was the style of worship. I don't know. I just talked to one member this week, because this topic is coming up all the time, about de-churching, and she said, and this is somebody whose spouse has never come. She comes faithfully every Sunday. And she said, my husband isn't very musical, and there's so much music, and he just doesn't like it. Now, I don't know if that's because he feels like he's not, can't keep up, or I don't know. But Lutherans, we're like all about music. We got Bach and we got everything, and we love music. So that's not a problem, but that's like I don't fit. Because, and so you go to some of these other churches where you have a concert for about, 4 songs, and then you have a 40-minute sermon, and people go home, which is what their worship is. That's the liturgy of a lot of non-denominational churches. Well, a lot of people fit better, I guess. They feel they do. But politics, 13%. So, I don't, again, we'd have to, one disappointment I have in the book is they dialed down much more in the evangelical part of things than the mainline, because they're evangelical pastors. So there's some stuff I want to learn more about, but that's where we get to give our survey next week, and we're going to start finding out why our people and your people are de-churching. So this is the results. I don't have time, please. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if the book gets to this, but when I see these all, I wonder if there's kind of different tiers of reasons or factors, because to me there's underlying factors that cause a lot of these effects. For instance, you move to a new community, you use that as a reason not to go back to church because you didn't want to be there to begin with. Same with COVID. And so I just wonder if there's something deeper that points back to the acceptance of the Bible story as a historical truth, right? And I kind of wonder if that's more the underlying cause of some of these effects.
A wonderful comment. And yeah, in fact, that's where I was going to go, was what is your reaction to this? So that's perfect. We've got some in the back. And I'm going to say, Patrick, that yes, we have to go deeper and say, okay, what is that? Why wasn't it a big enough priority? And then, but these folks are going to ask, what will it take to get you back? They asked that question too. So we'll talk about that. But I want to get some more reaction. Please.
I'm just curious with the data, looking at excluding the top one, the move to the new community, the next three, that totals 42%
Yeah.
of the reasons leaving. Now you overlay that with the timeline of showing de-churching. I'm curious if the data folks in the book did any correlation between what's going on, the onset of social media, for example, almost correlates with that timeline.
Yes.
Also with the more aggressive political environment that we're in, also correlates with that timeline.
Yeah.
Now you come over here and look at those numbers 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
I would submit that correlates as well with the onset of social media and the more aggressive political environment.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if they took a look at that at all.
They did, but they, at this point, even though they asked these questions and dial down as to why people, these are the questions that people gave. What happened? Why did you de-church? So we can postulate what's underneath them, which we have to do. So the authors, right out of the gate, say they think three things contributed to the 1990s and afterwards de-churching. They say the fall of the Iron Curtain and communism, and that we had this rallying thing against that, which is interesting, but they totally talk about social media and the onset of the smartphone, and then the Twitter and all of those ways of engaging, and the rise of the internet. It's like when TV came along, that might have started some de-churching, but you didn't have TV all the time, so it wasn't competing every Sunday. But now the social media thing is, they cite that as they believe that's one of the reasons. And then they do talk about the political side of things. That's part of it. So Wade, a very helpful connection there. Let's keep going with some other. We'll go back. We'll go to Ron first, and then we'll go to Billie Jean, and then behind you, and then back in the back. Yeah.
Bill, I might be jumping ahead. Do you have a comparable graph for leaving reasons evangelicals?
We do.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's okay. Let's just do it. Oh, here's something I'll throw in real quick while we still get more people's reactions. The data for Catholics and mainline Protestants were very similar, statistically. However, the move to a new community dropped down from 25% to 13% in this, but the other ones were very similar. Now you get to reasons for leaving in the evangelical churches. I moved to a new community is still 22%. Attending was inconvenient, divorce, remarriage, COVID-19 for some, because they dialed down more in evangelicals. That's why I think we got the COVID part in there. I didn't fit. I didn't experience much love for the congregation. So it wasn't radically different, but these were the top ones. Still, yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see there. Yeah, Billie Jean. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Wade, for that observation, because I was just thinking, I think people leave the church because they begin, I think it does start with, they start not believing in God or that there is a God, and then all those little G's, the little gods come in. All those things that you just mentioned, Wade, those are all little gods that people would prefer to spend their time with instead of worshiping God, loving God, attending church, being with like-minded people.
Okay, so I'm going to say, I think that's a very valid point, Billie Jean. I'm going to say that so far the research shows that there is a smaller segment of people that have theological crises, and that's the part. That the other part are folks that truly didn't make an intentional reason to leave. They didn't say, I don't believe in God anymore. They just drift away. Now, we can postulate about, well, there had to be something more to that, but it's interesting. The data is showing that that is not the majority of folks. That's not the majority. But I'm with you. I have to wonder, well, if you drifted away so easy, did you, and that gives me an opportunity to say that in the dialing down on the evangelical side that these folks did, they talk about cultural Christians. And these are people that when they test their orthodoxy, and all of these groups got, I'll show you all this. They've tested, each of these groups with, do they believe in the Nicene Creed? Do they believe Jesus is the Son of God? So they've kind of done a research as to what really are the beliefs. The cultural Christians, very low when it comes to Orthodox Christianity. They kind of attended because it was the thing to do. They kind of, and these are folks that have definitely de-churched at an even larger scale, but they have different reasons. So yeah, there are some people that just maybe didn't have that foundation in the beginning, and so they're swept away by all the other gods of our culture. There's no question that competition for your time and my time today is the perhaps biggest challenge for the church today. But yeah, so very helpful. Let's keep going, get a few more reactions. I got Wayne, yes, Ed in the back. And then is there more in the back over here? I thought Jane, did you have a hand up? I thought I had some more hands in the back. No? Hands down. Okay, Dave, after Ed, Dave. Okay.
Is there any mention about the spiritual but not religious people?
Yes.
Where they kind of go, I believe in God, I believe in the whole thing, but religion is messed up faith.
Yeah. There is, and we will get into some of that because there's a smaller number of the D-Church that they are called the ex-evangelicals because they said no to all this doctrine and church stuff, and so that there is definitely we've got some of that data too. So. And maybe there were quite a few of those folks in the church. I don't know if I wanted to say this yet, but a lot of people looking at the data of de-churching are less concerned because they think this was almost a purging. Now, I don't like that. Don't throw anything at me.
A bottle of bacon.
Get the vegetables out there. Because that sounds so judgmental, right? It's like, but there is a segment of folks from the data that, they really went for, my friends went. And so they didn't have a foundation and they quickly drifted away. And so that a lot of the people who are now going to become nuns, who used to say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian on the survey, but now they just say nun, are those people that were on the margins anyway. That is a dynamic. I'm not ready to, it just sounds too, I don't think we can dismiss that's a huge group of the D-Church, but it's a part of it. Okay, Dave, yes.
You touched on this earlier in your comments, but somewhere along the line, the real issue goes beyond the de-churching, and that's how many of those people that no longer are attending church regularly have had their faith impacted. That is, do they still pray? Do they still believe? Do they still have the faith? But then what happens in the next chapter is there's not that influence at home or wherever living may be, those circumstances. And then the next wave is they don't get the Bible stories, they don't get the faith, and then the next generation. So it's the downstream that is, and just getting people back in the pews, is that going to be enough, actually?
Yeah, the authors are going to say, no, we've got to do better with discipleship, and they're going to say at the end of the book that congregations need to be balanced with real dedication. They got to walk the walk. They got to walk, not just the talk. They got to serve, love, care, engage with the needs of the community, and that a lot of the younger people in particular are wanting that, but also to have the doctrine and beliefs that go along with it. That's really where they go to. I think there's some truth to that. But Dave, a number of important points you made. Yes, there's a generational effect that's very concerning. You know, so when they test, so they tested each of these groups, mainliners, Catholic, evangelicals, the cultural Christians, and the ex-evangelicals, to test their orthodoxy. Like things like, do you believe Jesus is the Son of God? Do you believe worship's important? And you know what? It's different for each group, but especially for the evangelicals, they still believe. They actually have a higher score on orthodoxy on some of the basic tenets than the mainline Protestants do that aren't de-churched. So what that's saying, according to them, is that people who have de-churched don't necessarily, they haven't said, no, I'm done with the faith. Each group is different. The ex-evangelicals, they were asked, would you ever go back to an evangelical church? 100% said no. They are done with that expression. I will never go back, when they were asked. Now, they asked what, and so this is the perfect spot to start moving to a little bit of hope, to bring you back next week for more. Each of these groups were asked, what would it take for you to return? What would it take for you to return? And there's a whole other survey and answers to that. Most of them talk about friendships. But here's the amazing thing. Because I know you're like me. You're getting this for the first time maybe, or maybe not. But when I heard this at first, I said, no way. But the number one thing that the D-Church say, what they need to come back, is an invitation.
Pastor Bill, this is both an opportunity you're presenting, but also personally a challenge, because I have a number of neighbors or friends that are in this non-attending church and haven't for a long time, where I've been probably reticent to go and say, would you like to come to church with me or whatever. But taking this survey and just using it as kind of an opening in a discussion with them, without any pretense about what you ought to do, but just exploring with them. And my challenge is, will I walk out of here today and actually do it? I'd like to, but will I actually do it? Be interesting even to try one or two and see how it goes.
I did not prepare this speech ahead of time, Dave. That is a Holy Spirit moment. I see a hand in the very back, I think. But I gotta just chime on to what Dave just said. I hope that the survey you will receive next week will be exactly maybe the opening. Because if people were de-churched, a very large number of them, that's what they say is an invitation. Not all of them. People with deep wounds, deep hurts, deep theological struggles, issues, they're going to need a lot of conversation and a lot of care. But I hate to call it low-hanging fruit, but the hopefulness here is, and there is hope, let me jump ahead here, is that it may not be as monumental of a barrier as we think. I'm always afraid to talk to someone, Dave, you and me together, who's de-churched, because I think they're going to be mad at me or whatever. But they're actually maybe just waiting, you know. And so maybe this survey, if you were able to say, hey, you know, I know you used to attend church. Our church is just trying to understand more of why people stopped attending. Would you mind filling this out? And then maybe that will lay a foundation to say, well, this is who my church is, and maybe you'd like to try it again. We'd love to have you. Most of the people who are back into this church, they came because they got an invitation. And remember that Lutheran Christians, I had one, I won't say who told me this because I don't want to, get him in trouble or anything, but he told me, we were out playing golf actually, Bill, we're just not good at that. And he's right. We're just not good at doing the invitation thing. The average Lutheran, this is old data, invites someone to church once in their lifetime. So, given that the D church, these are not even unchurched people. These are not completely non-Christians. These are people that still, a lot of them hold basic Christian beliefs, but they no longer attend. And an invitation. In the very back, I think. Yeah, Clyde, sure.
Yes, you mentioned that churches...
Go real close, Clyde. Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah.
You mentioned that the churches that are growing the most are Baptist and Assembly of God. And I was wondering if those two churches emphasize altar calls. Is that a factor in church growth?
Yeah.
And we went to an Assembly of God for a while, and they almost did that to an extreme with not so much emphasis on discipleships.
Yeah. Let me just make sure I'm clear. The Southern Baptist Convention has dropped too. So the Baptists have dropped. The Assemblies of God, not all Pentecostal churches, but in particular the Assemblies of God denomination is one of the larger ones that has not declined, and there was one more that I can't remember. What is the reason for that? Anybody's, we'll step into that and we'll wrestle with that some more. Okay, let's bring this to a close. There is lots of hope here. This is a moment of opportunity. And it's also an opportunity for you to do in-reach as well as outreach. Maybe it's a neighbor who used to attend some church 30 years ago, or maybe it's somebody you know of Silverdale Lutheran who doesn't come. That invitation, the reaching out, that connection does make a difference. Okay, we have scratched the surface today. I want to say that I am blown away and touched. I don't know how I can communicate this to you by the fact that this room is packed. The most hopeful thing for me is that each one of you is here, that you care about your kids and grandkids and friends and neighbors, and you're wondering, what might we do as a church to connect? And so this gathering is a prayer. Lord, help us. We want people to know the good news of the gospel just like we have. Okay, come back next week. I'm going to give you lots more stuff, and we're going to get into what would it take to bring people back as well. Fill out those papers, and then please, if one person from each table could bring them up and put them up here on front, that would be great, or just leave them on the table. We need to set up for quilters as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Look at this full room. Yeah.